All right, let me turn this down. I don't want that like too loud. So, hey guys, sorry for not being around on Sunday. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff happen just with the house that I'm in. So I'll wait till people show up and hello, yes, first. But yeah, I had a leak in my. I did talk about BoJack at one point. Yes, I did do that. But no, yeah, I had a leak in my house, and I had a leak in my house for like the last 4 days, I think. Well, it's been a lot. It's gotten better now. I think it's still like, it's still bad, but not bad enough that I can't like not be worried about it. So yeah, I had to deal with that on Sunday, and then I just haven't been like feeling too well. I honestly don't even like feel too well now. But you know, you do what you gotta do. And I like being here, so hopefully it'll like cheer me up. What are your favorite and least favorite parts of Hunter x Hunter? Bones 48. I mean, this is gonna sound really weird, but my favorite part of Hunter x Hunter is probably the fact that it just doesn't care about you. Like, I think that the thing that I most appreciate, aside from like the awesome characterization and stuff like that, but with Hunter x Hunter, it just like does whatever it wants constantly. And then you just like are along for the ride. Like Hisoka is such like a major character, for example, and he will like be around in like the entire first like core or arc, depending on what you want to call it. And he'll like do stuff that you just assume was like regular anime nonsense. Like I'm pretty sure he like slices a guy open with cards at one point, like the first part of the show. And then he can like sense people, and you're just like, oh, he's just a creepy psychotic clown man. But then like 150 episodes later, it'll be like, oh no, that was actually Nen, and we are having like huge world building. And there's like powers and abilities, and like we can sense like Nen and everything. And it basically, it's just like, we're telling a story, we're gonna tell it at our own pace, and we don't care what's like the regular kind of like thing to introduce here, or the pacing of this. It's just like, I don't know, it treats you like you're like an adult who can process these things, and it doesn't apologize about what it is, and that's really cool. And I think it's pretty consistent in that throughout like the entirety of the show. My least favorite thing about Hunter x Hunter is, and this is also weird because it's like just really great at the same time, the Chimera Ant arc is longer than some whole anime. Like it is 60 some odd episodes, I think, and maybe I'm even wrong there. But yeah, that is probably my least favorite part, is that the pacing in that like arc of the show feels really, really slow. But then when it comes to like, you know, fruition, when everything comes together, you realize like why the pacing had to be like that. So yeah, that's probably like, I think the two things off the top of my head when I think of like my favorite thing about Hunter x Hunter, my least favorite thing, is that it's a really fun ride to be on, but then like once it, I think, gets going, it just doesn't stop, and that's really cool. But then I guess like the pacing towards like the back end, you're like wondering, how is this gonna work, what's going on? But even that's really cool. So I don't know, it's just a really good anime, one of the best animes I've ever seen. So hope that answers your question. You can make all the what is this, Omino Man, what is this, Minoman? Yeah, do I make a Drake leak joke or not? You can make all the Drake jokes that you want. You know what, I am so far removed from social media, but even I heard about this and I think it's hilarious. So at least people's reactions to it. Right the path. Sorry to hear about the league. Yeah, me too, but I think it's going better, so shouldn't be too bad. Nicholas Silstern, what are your thoughts about the OG God of War creator hating the Norse story? I haven't heard about that. I have been a fan of God of War, literally maybe since I was like 14, I think is when I played my first God of War game. I think I played God of War 3 first, funny enough, because it just looked really pretty. And I needed a game to be able to justify me getting a PS3. That's not true. No. I had a PS3 already. And then because the PS3 launched with like Heavenly Sword, and then Lair, which is why I got it, because I love dragons. I've talked about dragons on the channel a bunch. And I got the PS3 specifically because of Lair. Which if people haven't played Lair, remember Lair, please go play Lair. It is a bad game that I can't recommend highly enough. But I've followed God of War for years now. Like nearly half my life, I guess. And I wouldn't be surprised if the creator of the original God of Wars, if it's not the same person again, I don't know, wasn't like a huge fan of the Norse story, because I think it like just changes so much. I think a huge part of Kratos in the original God of War games was Calliope and his dead wife, right? And this idea of him being just like this consistently angry, violent man, and that fueling him and the revenge that he's on, and then ultimately learning through his kind of adventure with Pandora, that he could end up being the hero. Now I use like hero loosely because, you know, he kills the Pantheon. But that was like a massive, I want to say like the PSP game even kind of like investigated his relationship with Calliope a bit more. So his daughter, the daughter that he murdered, for people who don't know, and sorry to spoil that game for you, that came out like in 2005 or something like that. But I think the PSP game is like something with like the Elysian Fields. I forget what it is. Maybe it's just like called Ghost of Sparta. But that's a huge part of Kratos' character. And then ultimately in Ragnarok, and then I guess God of War, and then God of War Ragnarok, I don't think Calliope's mentioned once. Maybe Atreus, I think, knows he has a sister, maybe. But Kratos' old family is largely forgotten. And I think for whoever created, and again, I don't know, whoever created the original God of War games, if they were kind of like using Calliope, his daughter, and then his wife as the linchpin for his entire character journey, and for those to be forgotten and then replaced with Atreus, and then Laufey, I think it would come across a little bit weird. Now again, I love these games. I think pretty much every single one of them is a masterpiece. But I guess just conceptualizing it, I can see why the original creator probably wouldn't, you know, be a huge fan, because, you know, our works are our babies. Our fictions are like extensions of us. And for, if it's true, like another team to come in and change it, I think is like, you know, fundamentally uncomfortable for any creator. But that doesn't stop them from being good. So, you know. Atragord, funny, I didn't get into Hunter x Hunter until the Ant arc. There's a lot. There's a lot before then. There's a lot. Ryan Lowe, I'm looking forward to more of the Jujutsu Kaisen anime. Hope nothing bad happens to Joe. Okay, so funny enough, the reason I haven't even really made another Jujutsu Kaisen video is because I haven't been able to watch this series, because the Crunchyroll account that I was using, I don't have access to it anymore, and that was how I was watching it. So obviously I probably just need to go like on the internet and like pirate it or something, or, you know, maybe not pirate if that's illegal. Ooh, yeah. But I haven't watched it in weeks and weeks and weeks, and I almost don't even want to like read it, because I just love being able to watch something every week so much. But I'm not watching it every week now, so it's just like, it defeats the purpose. So yeah, I might have to just like straight up find another way to watch it. And I also hope that nothing bad happens to Gojo. Wink wink nudge nudge. because he's just like my favorite character, one of my favorite characters in fiction right now. So, have you ever played the Spider-Man 2 PS5 game yet? If so, what are your thoughts on the game's story? Okay, so I haven't. I have not. I hadn't even finished the original Spider-Man on PS4. I have that and then the Miles Morales add-on, but I have not finished them. They are good games though. I will always say that those games are like really, really fun. I just haven't like finished a game. Well, that's not true. I finished a very select few amount of games in like the last like 5 years. So I can't really comment on that story, but at some point I will, right? Like there's just so many great games. I really wanted to play Jedi, whatever the sequel to Fallen Order is. Oh gosh, I was gonna say Survivor's Guilt, but I haven't played that one either. There's a bunch of games that I need to like kind of get on. I'm just so busy all the time that I can't. So, but yes, I do need to play all those AAA games that are, you know, really good. Except Suicide Squad. I've heard Suicide Squad was like terrible, which is sad because I love Rocksteady and then the Arkham series. I got into the Arkham series when I was like pretty young. So, you know, hearing that Rocksteady basically just like cashed out for lack of a better term, and they just saw like big green dollar signs in the air and said, you know, we're gonna make a game with microtransactions and we're just gonna slap a Suicide Squad sticker right on it. You know, I think that's pretty sad because it's very apparent that the Arkham series versus the game that they've made now are like completely different conceptually, as far as the artistic approach that they went for it. And that kind of sucks, you know, because again, I think money making and capitalism is the worst thing that's happened to art in our modern era. Because like once you get incentivized to start seeking like revenue and profit from art, you stop making art for art's sake and you start making art for money's sake, and then you're not making art. So OB God of War on the PSP was wild. I heard like, you know, the PSP was a very fun era of video games because I know Sony was frothing at the mouth seeing Disney, or Disney, good lord, Nintendo, which is like the video game equivalent of Disney, Nintendo's kind of success with their handheld devices. Because if I remember, gosh, I know the GameCube was a cult classic, but I don't think GameCube was like huge. The Wii obviously was massive. If people are too young in here to remember the Wii coming out, oh my gosh, that like ran the world when the Wii came out. But it was always like the Game Boy, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, all of those, just, you know, like everybody had one. And of course, like, you know, Sony wanted to get in on it, and they had like 2 good games on PSP. And I think there was always like this, like the one kid in school who had a PSP, and it was like Battlefront. I think there was a Star Wars game on PSP. It was, I think it was Battlefront, and then there was God of War on PSP. And those are the only 2 games that I have ever heard people say were good on that. I've not played either. Well, I've played like console and computer Battlefront, but not on the PSP. I've played the PSP, and it is not fun for me. My hands are huge, so that tiny little device is not great for me, especially like the joystick that they use. I just never liked it. But yeah, I'm sure they were wild because, you know, God of War was just like an excellently made series. It's just great. It's like gaming royalty. How do you feel about Spy Family becoming the face of the childcare genre? Sadly, I have not seen all of Spy Family season 2. That is another one that I like need to catch up on. I absolutely adored Spy Family season 1. I didn't think I would. It is really, really cute. So anything good that comes from Spy Family, literally anything, you know, and this is gonna be like, the episodes that I haven't seen are like terrible or something. But as far as I know right now, Spy Family is just like really, really good. because it's just like so feel good and cute. Like there's so many things in the world that I think are very good at being down to earth and kind of like makes you think and reflects reality, kind of like the gritty, grimy darkness, and not everything is happy. As far as like fiction, right? There's tons of fictions where it's just like crappiness, like, and that's a part of the story, is, you know, like BoJack Horseman, how I got my start. It's just like crappy all the time. But then there are stories that are like just happy and feel good, and that's important too. And that's what I think like Spy Family is, as far as I know. So it being like the face of childcare genre of anime, which I didn't know was a thing, I'm fine with that. That seems really cool to me. Because I love Spy Family so much. It's just so cute. Like every time I watch it, I just smile. So I do have to catch up on it. The only time I ever sit down to think about it is actually when I'm at the gym. I'm on like the treadmill, and then I'm like, oh, I could watch Spy Family right now. But then what happens is that I don't want to have to, like, while I'm pedaling, read the subtitles to understand what's going on, because my phone is so far away from me, because it's like on the rest, the bars or whatever it is for the where you put your phone on the treadmill and on the bike, and I don't want to have to like squint to see it, so I just don't watch it. So I need to. Maybe I'll do that like tomorrow or something, because really good show. Let's see. Barely Basil. I've never seen Bungo Stray Dogs. I used to be so much more of an anime like enjoyer. I don't know what happened. I need to get back into it. Brian, oh no, I have to read Savage Books. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I have to read. I do. I don't think you understand. Not even just you, Brian, but just like the general people who like watch me and support me, like how much I read every day. And because people always ask me, they're just like, oh yeah, do you read for fun? And I was like, Lord, no. I don't want to read. It's to the point where I will have like a text to speech software on my manuscripts and just listen to them, because I don't want to read anymore. I read like so much every month, all the time. I reread the scripts that I write every like week and a half for YouTube. I read manuscripts. I read over my books that I'm writing. So it's just like, yeah, I don't want to read anything extra. Now, will I? Is subbed anime generally 10 times better than dubbed anime? Yes, except for like a notable few exceptions. But so yeah, I genuinely don't want to read any more than I have to, because I'm a visual learner. Again, as I've said hundreds and hundreds of times, I love storytelling through TV shows, movies, video games. Video games are my favorite. They're so interactive. I love them. So if I can do basically anything aside from read, because I do it so much for my job, then yeah, I'll choose that option. So Betty, love to see you here too. Howdy yourself. Let's see. Hello, and how old are you? I'm almost 30, which is like terrifying to think about. I literally forget my age all the time. I'll be 29 this year. So that's not 30 yet. I'm not 30 yet. You can't take that from me. Sometimes you have to become Blackbeard to enjoy your favorite stuff. Yes. Sometimes you do have to engage in a little bit of online piracy to enjoy your favorite stuff. So that's a good tip for anyone who maybe is struggling to find the fiction that they want. maybe be Blackbeard. Tubby, yo Savage, what's your best writing tip? This is hard because there's so many, and there's so many bad writing tips. Well, there are bad writing tips, but there are also writing tips that are good for some people at certain levels of writing, and then writing tips, those same writing tips can be bad for other people who are at a different level. But if, and this is going to seem like so trite and like Hallmark cardy, but like my best writing tip is to just continue to write. There are so many people who want to like write, and then it becomes hard, which it is. It's very hard to actually like write something completely. It is incredibly difficult. But there are people who like give up and they just like stop writing. And for those people who do it and they find out that it's not their passion, it's not what they're invested in, you know, like that kind of thing, that is completely fine. I have no problem with that, because like that's just to do this type of thing, to like take the time and energy required to be able to write. It takes like, you know, huge commitments on your part. And if you don't want to do it, if that's not your jam, then don't do it. But for those people who like it is their passion and they do enjoy it, and they stop it because of like, oh, I'm afraid of people seeing my work, I'm afraid of putting myself on the page, I'm not progressing as fast as I want to, the story that I'm telling seems too ambitious, the roadmap is too hard, I don't know what to do, other people are better than me, that kind of stuff. Like, you just gotta push past that. Like, I'm gonna be real, you just gotta keep being bad. You gotta be bad until you're good. Because I guess this has to be like the best writing advice I can give, because without this, you're not writing. Like, if you're not writing anything, any other writing advice I give is moot, because it doesn't apply to you, right? Now, let's just say you are writing, and you're like, oh yeah, I write consistently, I'm trying to write X, Y, and Z. What's like an actual writing tip that you can give to help me better my writing? Again, it's gonna be super cliche and trite, but like, consume writing, consume like fiction, and always be critical. I think this is like one of the most difficult things just for like regular, average, everyday people to just do. It's to like always be critically thinking. And I'm not saying you have to go into every situation being like, if something doesn't meet the standards that I want for my critiques, I have to automatically dislike it. Because again, I like terrible movies, I like terrible shows, I like terrible music, I like terrible stories because they entertain me, not because they're good. But if you're writing something and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't really know how to do this, I don't know how to become inspired to do this, I don't know the next steps, it pretty much is almost like incumbent to just go out and anything that you've enjoyed from a narrative perspective, any fiction that's out there that you kind of like feels that has spoken to you, look at what it does and try to figure out like, yeah, how does this work? What did they do? Why does it speak to me? If I don't like it and other people do like it, what speaks to them? You know, it's the biggest, I think, differentiator between serious writers and writers who are just kind of like doing it as a hobby is the writers who start to use the fiction that they interact with as a critical resource for how to improve in their own work. Whereas kind of just like hobby fun, you know, writers, they can completely shut their brains off 100% of the time and just like literally look at a story as like, do I like it? If not, I don't want to watch it anymore. Or like, I don't want to interact with it anymore. So I think that's like the next best thing, is like learning how to be critical. And when I say be critical, I mean like literally be like, okay, how are they introducing their characters? How are they introducing their conflict? What is the conflict? Does it speak to me? Is it engaging? Is it understandable? Am I relating to this conflict? How do they introduce their villain? What's the villain's motivations? Like literally creating like a checklist of how you go through interacting with like these fictions, because the more you notice trends and tropes within fictions, like the less you have to create for yourself. That's why there's like tropes. That's why there's like, you know, all these different can't even think of the word for them, but like cliches, you know, because the cliches help you create a foundation for writing that you can then subvert. Like if I had to create new stuff every time I wanted to write a story, and again, I've completed 5 full books, if I had to like make stuff up from the get-go, no, I'd never know what to do. But I take stuff that I'm inspired by, you know, all the anime that I've inspired by, the video games, the comic books, all that kind of stuff. And I use it to be able to help me create my own stories. So I think that's like some of the best writing advice that I can give. And then everything else is kind of like too specific to be able to get into, like, because there's advice about dialogue that I could give. There's advice about transitionary writing that I could give, about stuff about purple prose writing and pacing and all that kind of stuff. But that's more of like a specified kind of like question about, you know, individualized writing aspects. But yeah, the best writing advice is write. And then the second best writing advice is be critical, and always be looking for the things that like make you interested in stuff and how you can replicate that. Yes, so do you watch anime? I think it's a gorgeous art medium, but the anime storytelling medium is very different from Western storytelling. Would you do a deep dive studying the differences? Yeah, so that's a great question. I actually have a lot of thoughts, and I won't get into them here because, again, I don't want to be in here like forever. But there's a ton of differences between Western storytelling and Eastern storytelling. Western storytelling is, again, this is from stuff that I've read from other authors, dissecting macro storytelling, and then my own thoughts. Western storytelling is all about the destination, while Eastern storytelling generally is about the journey, right? And what do I mean by that? Western storytelling is very, very focused on where your narrative will end, because it's focused on the outcomes of the characters. And so this is reflected a lot in kind of like big twist endings, climaxes, right? So when we create trilogies in the West, everything is about like the culmination and the closure of the characters' journeys, and everything making sense, and then the loose ends being tied up. No Deus Ex Machinas, things coming out of nowhere. It is the destination, it's the end point of the narrative that creates the most impact in Western storytelling. And a lot of the times we see that the end point is what actually like crystallizes the message and the theme of that story. Eastern storytelling, in large parts, not always, but in large parts, is much more concerned with the journey, right? So it's like what the characters go through and what they have to do in order to get to the destination. And so this is why in many cases, what Eastern storytelling will have, like, from a Western view, will have a little bit of like a lackluster ending, or a very like, I don't want to say muted, but it's not an exaggerated climax. There are some stories with like, you know, exaggerated climaxes, but a lot of Eastern storytelling will have almost like an absence of a climax. At least that's what it feels like to a Western audience. And the reason is because they don't necessarily focus on a climax. They want you to experience the storytelling holistically through the entire process. Miyazaki films are like a great example of this. Like, you know, like Howl's Moving Castle is almost like a combination of like 3 or 4 like vignettes all together, like short stories, that you, and it's beautiful. And the point of it being beautiful is so that, again, you're on this journey. You're way more focused about being in the moment. And you go through it with the character and you can appreciate it. Instead of, I think, waiting for everything to come to fruition at the end, right? So again, that's for kind of like longer form storytelling. Anime is completely, anime's not completely different from Western storytelling, but it is different. Anime, I think, allows itself to be much more weird than Western storytelling. For the most part, anime, I think, just does what it wants to do and tries to justify everything internally later. It is, I think, conceptually adventurous almost at all times because there's nothing that anime won't engage in. Whereas in the West, there are very kind of like typical plot points, and almost like narratives that get continuously recycled. Whereas like anime, it'll literally be anything, and it'll be like anything done sometimes with the most like kind of like whimsical, you know, carefree sense, and then sometimes it'll literally be like, what if we had a dude who had like a notebook that would kill people, but the dude is 17, and then the demon who kills people when he writes their name in the notebook is actually like completely ambivalent about the whole process, and we're gonna actually examine it through the lens of like a super genius detective. And you would never think that something so silly like, oh yeah, writing a person's name in a book would kill them, would be investigated so like earnestly. So I think that's like the thing with anime, is that like it can be so diverse because, again, a lot of it is the journey of being on the anime with the characters and growing with them. Whereas in the West, it's still about characters and like character driven drama, but it's like the culmination of everything. Like Death Note, and maybe might have been a bad example because it's a very westernized anime, and it is very much largely about the climax of, you know, Light coming to getting what's coming to him. But also like he still very much does, I think, exemplify a narrative, and his journey exemplifies a narrative of like being on the journey with the character rather than being consumed with like the destination. So again, as you can tell, I have a lot of thoughts about this. I won't be here forever talking about it because we got to do other stuff. But I at some point I will do a video about it because I think it is pretty interesting. Oh Lord. When the Kinect came out, we knew the world was going in the wrong direction. Yeah, I remember the Kinect. Like one of 5 people who remembers the Kinect. Have you ever played Hellblade? Curious on your take on the writer. I have not, and this is gonna be like, I guess, a consistent thing that I'm always just gonna have to deal with. I have not done something. There's a lot of stuff that I have done. But I know about Hellblade, Senua's Saga, I think it's called. I'm really interested in it. I can't remember if it's a PS5 exclusive or an Xbox exclusive. I have a PS5. I also have a computer, so that may make it moot regardless. But I do really want to play it because I know pretty much like the whole thing is based in her psychosis. Like the main character, I think, is going through an episode of hearing things and seeing things that may or may not be real. And I know that the second trailer, or the first trailer for the second game, came out a while ago, and it was just gorgeous. So I do want to play, mainly because, again, you know, I have my entire education in psychology, and then I'm a writer too, so it'd be really interesting to see that game. Man, oh man, the dub for Spy Family is actually solid. It is very solid. It is very, very good, and that's why it's so hard for me to switch over to the sub. It's very, very good. Bones 48, not to get you to talk smack, but what's something popular that you think is a little overrated? Ant-Man. I will very proudly say the first Ant-Man movie. I will never forget this, and this will be a hill that I die on. I remember everyone raving about the first Ant-Man. And honestly, I think it was because, again, at that point, Marvel had been getting a little bit stale. This is at the very start of like the staleness coming in. But I remember George R. Martin, who was my inspiration for getting into writing, and of course the creator of the Song of Ice and Fire series, talking about how Ant-Man was his favorite Marvel movie. And that like blew my mind because Ant-Man was so internally inconsistent. And again, I'm not one of those people that can't enjoy like dumb, stupid movies. But there's a difference to me from a movie being purposely dumb and stupid so you can have fun, and then a movie being like, these are the rules that I'm setting up for myself, and this is the expectation you should have for me, and then just completely throwing those rules out the water. Like what I mean is, Ant-Man will be like, yeah, we preserve weight, no matter how big we are. So when I'm small, I'll still be hitting people as if I'm a 200-pound man, but then he like runs on the barrel of a gun, right? Like, and if a grown man was on the barrel of a gun, you couldn't hold the gun up anymore. And he'll like, people will be carrying tanks and stuff like that in their pockets, and it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, unless I'm mistaken, and like, then they're not supposed to be the same weight. But then it's just like, if he actually wasn't the size or the strength and size of a man, then like, how does he do anything? Because he's the size of an ant. I don't know. I don't think that that movie is that great. It's, you know, again, it's not terrible, but I don't think it's nearly as good as a lot of people think it is. If we want for another example that's not so like right off the top of my head, Lord, I mean, I thought and I guess people agree with me on this, but maybe not. I thought the Batman, so the new Batman with the vampire guy, I don't know what his name is. I thought that movie was the best bad movie I've ever seen. And I appreciate it more for what it does to Bruce more than I do watching it. Right? Like and what I mean by that is I like the idea of a movie calling out Bruce nearly as being the villain for him beating up a bunch of dudes on the street rather than going after like the real people who are corrupting Gotham. I love that idea as like a movie, because again, that's like always been like one of the biggest critiques of Batman, is that he's going around as a multi-billionaire, beating the piss out of people in Gotham when he probably could just like make huge sweeping structural changes to the city in the first place just with his money. And that's what the film is about largely. It's like, yeah, you spend your time like going down in the sewers and like in like subway stations and knocking the teeth out of like random dudes when like you're not even going after like the big fish. Now I will say again, I really like the theme of that movie, but like watching that movie, oh my gosh, I mean, it was cool and beautiful, but like there were some parts where I was just like, what is going on here? I probably would need to see it again, because again, it's not terrible, but I'm not like the huge fan that like a lot of other comic book fans were. So there's probably more. There's probably like a few that I'm forgetting, but that's the one that comes to mind. All right. Let me see. W, have you ever seen Godzilla -1? I have not, but my friend constantly is seeing it. Like, I have a Godzilla freak friend, and if he's watching, he knows who he is. And he's only had good things to say, and everyone has good things to say, so I probably need to see that too. Do you have a website we could send our writing for you to critique? Yes. At the end of every video, I call it out. It's under link. I think like I have a link like in the description of every video, so just click on there. Literally savagebooks.net. You can hire me as your editor. So go, if you want that, go do that. Bebop, do you prefer Western or Eastern? I'm going to assume this is about storytelling, not continents or hemispheres. I don't have a preference. I think I'm more consistently, I think maybe like, since I do like climaxes and circular storytelling and all that kind of stuff, I think maybe like a good climax is really good, which may lean me towards Western. But I've seen like a bunch of stuff from Eastern storytelling. Like some of my favorite fiction ever is Eastern. So, you know, I think it depends. Like, you know, I think I've seen way more bad Western storytelling than bad Eastern storytelling, but that may be because I simply consume more Western storytelling. So I don't know if I have a definite preference. Golden Age, what stories or series ended up disappointing you towards the end? Am I really gonna, you guys already know. Everyone already knows. I mean, the world already knows. Obviously Game of Thrones. Funny enough, I actually may be doing a video on something kind of like this topic. But there's three that comes to mind immediately. It's Game of Thrones, which obviously, you know, it did what it did and it took itself out the zeitgeist. Penny Dreadful, which I almost give a pass to, almost, but not really, because it was supposed to go on for longer, but then it got canceled, so they tried to wrap up the whole show in a single season. So that was terrible at the end. And then House of Cards. House of Cards is probably the worst ending to a show that I think I've ever seen. It went from obviously everything after season 2 when Frank actually gets the presidency. Again, spoilers for a show that came out like 15 years ago. Season 3 and season 4 were definitely still good. Obviously not as good as season 1 and 2, but like, ooh, after that, man, that was some rough crap to watch. that was terrible. So, and you know, the whole stuff with Kevin Spacey too doesn't really help. But yeah, I think those, because it started off so good. And of course, like, we still have to wait for the A Song of Ice and Fire books to come out. And that may redeem a lot of what's going on with Game of Thrones and everything. So, you know, it still hurts. I just rewatched yesterday the final like sequence when Daenerys is like burning down King's Landing, and I just started shaking my head when Drogon flew over all the civilians and just like burned them to a crisp. I literally was just like, this is so stupid. So yeah, I almost don't even want to talk about it anymore. Hello, Adrian. I'm sorry I wasn't here on Sunday. I'm here now though. Daniel Gates, I really appreciate your perspective on Western versus Eastern films. The Boy and His Harem for me was very confusing, but I can see how that movie is more about the journey rather than the destination. Yeah, it's once, and I think that's like a huge thing with just media in general. Half of like good media, and it's really sad that this is the case, but half of good media, I feel like almost needs to be decoded first before you can like fully appreciate it. So like one of my favorite films ever is Cloud Atlas, which I want to say is based off a book, which I have, if so, I've not read it, but I'm pretty sure it's based off a book because the writer of Cloud Atlas was adamant that this book could never be adapted into live action because the book was so weird and it was so multifaceted. Like it took place over like countless generations and stuff like that. And then they made it into a book or a movie, and maybe it was the Wachowski sisters. I'm not even sure. It was crazy, but it is one of my favorite movies ever. But I did not enjoy watching that movie, like at all. It was not enjoyable. It was like 3 hours to watch the weirdest nonsense, but I enjoy it from a thematic perspective because I finally learned how to think about it. And I stopped trying to like dissect it like a typical story and started to think about it like poetry, and how each of the different kind of like acts and sections of the narrative kind of like rhymed, went together, gave each other energy, synergized, that kind of stuff. And then it became really powerful and really cool. And I feel like that's a lot of how just fiction in general, you're not gonna like a story until you learn how to think about it. And it is not your fault for not liking a story, nor is it your fault for not having the proper thought process on how to like digest it. But I think there is some type of joy in finding out like how to think about a story, or the intent behind it, or the theme, or like a way to process the information. Like once I found out, so James Wan is one of my favorite directors and producers in Hollywood right now because I love horror. And he's made some of my favorite horror films. And recently, recently being like 6 months ago, he put out a film called Malignant. And when I saw the first trailers for Malignant and I saw that it was directly directed by James Wan, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to love this, because James Wan has crafted some of, I think, the most like character-driven horror stories that I've seen. And I've seen a decent amount of horror movies. And they're serious without being like very in your face, and James Wan's movies largely are funny in the right spots and really creepy in the right spots too, and they don't take themselves completely like, you know, solemnly, even though they're dealing with death and all that kind of stuff, but they're just good all around horror movies. And so I started watching Malignance, and it was terrible. And I was like, James Wan, what happened? What what's going on? And I'm just sitting here watching this, and it's so campy, and it's so like, you know, it's just like bloody, and it's just ridiculous. And then I realized, like halfway through the movie, that it was almost like a mockumentary of a horror movie. Like it was supposed to be purposely ridiculous, because James Wan wanted to subvert the genre, like, but not in like a nuanced way. He literally was like, I'm going to make a ridiculous horror movie, but it's still gonna be a horror movie. And when I learned that it wasn't serious, I instantly enjoyed it like 10 times more. And when I say unserious, for people who haven't seen Malignant, it is unserious in like insofar as like there is a dead sibling attached to the back of the main, if you don't want spoilers, don't listen, but a dead sibling attached to the back of the main character's head that kills people, and then she has to fight herself, and he's evil, but I think he's always been on the back of her head, maybe hiding under her hair, and he knows karate, and they like do karate fighting when he takes over her body. I can't even begin to explain how weird this movie is. But that's like what we're dealing with. So I think that once you learn how to like what to expect and how to think about certain fictions, that helps a lot. So like the whole Eastern versus Western thing, I think is like an example of that. Free laws. Opposed to linear games with more story on the rails, how does an open game like The Witcher or Borderlands have a riveting story versus a more classical storytelling? Okay, so this is a great question. And again, I could spend like an hour just on this because I love video game storytelling. I've wanted to make a video game like since I was probably like 12 or 13. But there's a lot that actually goes into video game storytelling, because it's the most interactive form of narrative fiction that we have currently right now, because it's the only form of fiction that only progresses insofar as you make it progress, right? So if you're watching a TV show, you can do nothing and it will progress like simply by virtue of being on. If you're reading a book, the book is already written, and you will only gain knowledge of that book by reading the words on the page, right? So it's a little bit more interactive. Excuse me. Music and musicals and stuff like that, that progresses without any interaction from you. But video games are very unique because you have to make the story go forward, right? And because of that, video games largely, not always, but largely, will try to create the illusion of the character being like the vessel through how you interact with the game, right? So it's just like, yeah, you make this stuff go forward because you literally have to do it. And because of that, it's called like the illusion of choice, right? Now, by definition, the game is made for you, right? You're not making anything happen for the most part. You know, there's some games where that totally is the case, right? You know, like Minecraft and stuff like that, like instantly random generated games, and No Man's Sky, that kind of stuff, right? So there's things that can happen in those games that can never happen to anybody else simply by like math. But games where you have a structured story, so think of like The Last of Us or God of War, right? Where it is mostly linear, the pieces of the story and the side quests largely are related or reflect the core narrative, right? So like the side missions that you do in God of War relating to the Valkyries ultimately relate to Freya, because, you know, you find out that she is herself the queen of the Valkyries, and it adds depth to the core of what the story is, right? For those linear stories. Now you have games like Baldur's Gate and, like you were saying, Witcher 3, which still do have linear stories, but the major draw of the game is character choice. And so what happens is that even though you have a linear story, you have dozens of self-contained stories that can sometimes either end completely on their own or interact with each other. And this is like vastly more difficult to do from a writing perspective, right? Because like now it's like, oh yeah, we have to create, if you want to be good, like fully fledged narratives that stand on their own. And this is like the truest form of giving characters like freedom and agency, because they can just not engage with those stories if they don't want to, right? A lot of gaming companies are fearful of spending all that time and money when creating games simply for that aspect of the game not to be interacted with, which is why that they have linear storytelling, right? Because they're like, if we're going to spend upwards of, you know, millions of dollars creating content for players, we want the players to feel that their money is well enough spent by them engaging with these things, right? Because they want the reviews to be good, they want the player experience to be good, and they think that if the player doesn't engage with certain aspects of a game, either narrative or gameplay perspective wise, that they're not going to enjoy the game as much, right? So they put those gameplay aspects on the path of the player. But I would say my favorite types of games, so like Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Baldur's Gate, Hades, that kind of stuff, is where games bank on the fact that you won't discover everything, at least on your first playthrough, right? Which creates this kind of like unique system of your playthrough is yours and you get to find out the story on your own, right? So it's not just a difference in, I think, narrative. It's a difference in the creation of the story and the philosophy behind the interactivity that the consumer gets from it, right? Because you have games that railroad you in a completely still enjoyable experience, right? So, you know, like the Uncharted games, there's no side quests, pretty much. Everything is just like kind of like a cinematic adventure, which is still really compelling because ultimately at the end of the day, those characters I think are really good and inspiring, and there's a lot of cool stuff for you to do, and the visuals and the gameplay all come together. But you feel like you're being like almost brought alongside something that's happening without you, where some of the most memorable aspects of gaming usually come from taking the idea of a person controlling a character and merging that with the narrative so that the circumstances that you get engaged with become your own, right? And like there are a ton of options for you to choose from, or maybe the illusion of it, but you did a thing and like that consequence happens to you, right? So again, I don't even know if that properly answered your question, because like we're on the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like narrative storytelling in video games. This would be like truly an hour-long Nakey Jakey type video that I would have to do. But there's I think compatibility for both, but they are starkly different. And I prefer those, you know, choose your own adventures type open world things, because again, having an experience when I played Baldur's Gate 3, my experience was completely different from all my friends who played Baldur's Gate. Like it is as if we were playing different games, like pivotal characters that I had never even met, never even talked to, that they had basically were like, oh, I didn't even know you could progress through the game without them being there, right? So that kind of thing. So yeah, maybe that video will come in the future. All right. Hello, Donald. Thanks for the $20. Wow. Hello, Savage. I and my stepdad couldn't watch One Punch Man because it's no longer on Crunchyroll, and also Rhyme, Roses Are Red, playing NES console games are retro. It's time for Savage to play Metro. Yes. I will have to figure out how to play Metro. But that is very sad about One Punch Man. I think it's on Netflix. I think that's like where, maybe Hulu. I think it's honestly on Hulu. So if you have a Hulu account, that'll also probably, you know, do it. Yeah, but he's not letting go. No, he will get me to play Metro. There's a few Metro games though, so I have to like figure out what's going on. Because I might play the most recent one before anything else, because it looks the most pretty. All right, I'm gonna be here for, because again, I'm just like still not feeling like super well, so I'm gonna give it probably like 13-15 more minutes. When are we getting the Legally Blonde deep dive a la The Devil Wears Prada? I can't because that would just be, there's so much copyright on the internet. There's so, or like on YouTube. That video was already 20 minutes, almost like 17 and a half minutes. And maybe if Charlie the X goes in with me, I mean, I would love to, but Lord have mercy, the idea of putting up like a deep dive, because like deep dives for me, I've made like documentary-esque type videos that are like 30 minutes, 40 minutes almost. And those were a hassle. You guys don't understand how much like it takes for me to upload some of these videos, because it's just like so much copyright that I have to get past and like so much finagling. So, but it's not like I wouldn't want to. Brian, anime has better power magic system than the West. Yes, even better than that of Sanderson. Yeah, careful who you say that around. There's some writers in this chat who may want your address now. Hello, Stacy. Glad you're tuning in. Have you ever watched? Okay, so Bebop. Have you ever watched The Barbarian? I have watched. Oh crap! I'm thinking of that one horror movie, which may be Barbarian. I don't know. Is it a horror movie? I'll look out for your comment, because there's a horror movie that I think of, which is like there's a basement with a monster hiding in it, and that may be Barbarian. I'm not sure, but I have seen that. So let's see. Tamai and the SFM guy. Have you ever seen Mrs. Blue? I have not, so I can't comment on that. Yes, Legend of Zelda music in the background. I have to every time. It's just so relaxing. I literally fall asleep to this sometimes. Max, dude, I just finished Attack on Titan last night. I definitely loved how the story progressed, but as depressing as it got times, I almost felt like I owed us a more satisfying or hopeful ending. Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's anime. It's Eastern storytelling. It's not that concerned with the climax. It's another reason again why it's difficult for me to make a video on it. Because I'm trying to get all my thoughts together, because it's just been on. I was told about Attack on Titan when I graduated from like high school. So this is, you know, years ago. I remember being at my high school graduation party, and my friend telling me to watch Attack on Titan. So it's like a decade of content. And you know, Isayama making completely circular storytelling and whatnot, literally like circular storytelling. But yeah, I also felt like I wanted something too from the ending. Simply because I think I had westernized the story in my mind. But looking back, I think, you know, again, thinking about it as an Eastern story, it was what it was. Would I have enjoyed it more if it was, I think, bigger in the climax? Sure, but it is ultimately an Eastern story told by Eastern people, I think for Eastern people. So, I mean, of course, anime's for the world. Anime's probably the biggest export in the world. But I think that thinking about it from a Western perspective almost set yourself up for failure, because it was such a huge phenomenon in the West. So, Bebop, Game of Thrones had to have taken the biggest TVL. It's up there. There's a few things that are competing, but it's up there. I don't think I've ever heard anyone defend season 8 of Game of Thrones. There are people online, specifically like Reddit, who'll be like, season 8 wasn't that bad. And this is another interesting topic that I won't get into because it's way too long, but this is more of a psychology thing. So I've noticed that people who didn't have to wait for Game of Thrones don't think it was that bad. But people who did have to wait for Game of Thrones did not enjoy it. And it's really interesting because ultimately, of course, it's the same show. But I think there's a difference between having like 8 to 9 years of investment to be delivered that, and then people who binge it in like 2 months, 3 months, and they think, oh yeah, you know, this is fine. Because I think the people who had like a decade of investment in it, they, you know, had all the theories and they saw all the fandom surrounding outcomes, and the emotions I think were really heightened. But there are definitely people who defend season 8. To me, it's an unmitigated disaster, the likes of which I really haven't seen on TV before. And I'm so happy that Dan and Dave are not able to really do anything in Hollywood anymore, because I don't think that they deserve to. But you know, there are people who like it. And again, if you like season 8, that's your cup of tea. You know, you live your life the best way you can. I think it's terrible. Donald, $100. I am writing a nuclear post-apocalyptic streaming series where the Metro series meets Demon Slayer, called Irradiated, where a dad and a sister and a recently mutated dragon humanoid brother traverse through the wasteland against powerful mutants. Donald, might I have a suggestion? While I am very happy to take your money, go to my website and just buy a service rather than giving me money on YouTube, because I can just help you on the story instead of, you know, doing it like this. Plus, if you guys didn't know, YouTube takes like 55% of anything that you give on here, and then I get taxed, I think, like another like 40%. So I'm going to set up a way to give like donations. I have like a PayPal, and then any other service. But if you ever want to like really donate, just buy a book on my website. I have a link for it in my description of like, I think my about page for my website, or my YouTube channel. Or go to my website and like purchase a time to talk to me, like one-on-one, $30 for 30 minutes, $50 for an hour. That way you don't have to share me with chat. Yeah, because like I recently found out that YouTube is, I probably get like 30 cents on the dollar for every donation that I get. But yeah, Donald, reach out to me, because it's much better just to have me like go one-on-one with you than to, you know, be doing stuff like this through chat on YouTube. Oh my gosh. Cosmo, I feel like tabletop open video game storytelling is insanely tough to tackle, the narrative having to work out of order, and I guess it comes to mastering the episodic structure. So again, yeah, this is like one of the reasons that I think open world video games are considered like some of the best video games ever made. Of course, like we're not even getting into like GTA, and again, God of War being open world, but like not really open world. But there's a ton of like multi-narrative games. It's because they're really freaking hard to do. And only crazy people attempt them, and usually crazy people are the best artists. So, but yeah, it's really difficult because it takes a lot of time and effort. Doom Noir, hello. I'm glad you caught me. I'm gonna be here for literally probably like 10 more minutes. That's why Elder Scrolls got rid of player choice after Morrowind. Yeah, because I'm not even gonna like completely agree on that. I think that obviously in Elder Scrolls there's no like way to completely change the outcomes of games like in Baldur's Gate, but like there's unless you were the joke could be going completely over my head, but there's tons of ways for you to exude control, again, over finding stuff that you like have in the game. Man, how do you feel about the Netflix Avatar show is taking out the sexism? Okay, so I heard that this is a joke. I don't think that they're actually taking out, I'm pretty sure that was just like a fan joke. I don't think that's real. If it is real, I haven't seen the show yet because it's not out, so I can't make a commentary on it. There's sexism all through Avatar, but done, I think, purposefully so. Again, I would have to see it to make a commentary on it, but I can't because the show's not out. So we'll see in like 15 days, because I think it comes out on the 22nd. Uh, let's see. Playing through the Dark Souls, or in this case, Elden Ring, where you are thrown into a world as a blank slate. Only way to uncover the story is going through the game and uncovering the secrets by yourself. Yeah, I really enjoy games like that. Now, granted, I don't like Elden Ring or Dark Souls because those just aren't like my cup of tea type games. But it's, I think, a real draw. And how video games ultimately, I think there's no right way to make a video game, but it's kind of I think the encapsulation of what, like, if you're gonna make an adventure game, that's how you make an adventure game. You allow the player to discover the world and the game of their own accord. Rudis Magnuson, I can't believe Game of Thrones never came out with the season 7 or 8. Maybe maybe someday those seasons, I know, maybe someday those seasons will come out. It's incredible that they got all the way up to season 6 and then just stopped adapting the books. Maybe maybe HBO can like petition someone, maybe a big bearded man, to write content for it, so that way they could have something to adapt into really good, maybe like 9 to 10 episode seasons, you know. Yeah. Hey Savage, have you ever written fan fiction as the basis for the plot for any of your books? How terrible or useful might that idea be? I think that's probably fine. I think fan fiction, and this is maybe a hot take, is one of like the best ways to do writing. I started out doing fan fiction for Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And I think fan fiction is kind of like riding with training wheels in a bit, because you already get an established world and characters that you're familiar with, but now you can just kind of like play with it like in a playground, right? So I think it's a good idea. I have no problem with it. I think that's, and now you have to be careful, because obviously you can't get like too engrossed, because those aren't your characters, you don't really know them, and you have to like maintain the idea of like, I'm working in somebody else's world. If you're gonna have other people like read it, if other people aren't reading it, do whatever you want, that doesn't matter. But yeah, that's I think fan fiction is really cool, as long as of course you're being respectful to that person's work, if other people are reading it. Let me see. Donald looks, what do you think about the superhero fatigue? I ask as I have shelved my original superhero film as I'm afraid that the window is closed. No. Okay, so superhero fatigue is, I think, here, and this will be, I think, my last question, guys. Superhero fatigue is here because of, I think, the formulaic nature of how a lot of superhero fictions have been handled over the decades. Not just recently, it's just like decades of this. But I think superheroes are like kind of like an institutional part of Western fiction, and they're never gonna go away. Like, superheroes have been around for literally hundreds of years. Now, if your superhero story is very similar to the types of superheroes that we grew up with, and kind of like echo those fictions and the narrative styles around them, then sure, yeah, maybe some people are gonna be like, I've already got this. But as far as like superhero fatigue, just like shutting like down the entire kind of like consumer base of superheroes, no. Like, I think that there will always be people who are willing to, you know, engage with superheroes because they're really freaking cool. And if your story is unique and different, right? Because like The Boys is superhero based, but it's different. Invincible is superhero based, but it's different. People still go out to see certain Marvel movies, like, you know, Spider-Man No Way Home, or what's the one? Oh gosh, is it No Way Home? Whatever the most recent one is with all the villains, that was really cool. The Black Panther movies are really cool because they're unique. You know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily like super wrong with doing a superhero story right now, because the climate isn't just like superhero fatigue. insofar as like nobody's watching them anymore. It's just that people don't want to watch the same things that they have been watching for the last 50, 60 years, 70, 80 years, and then but also extremely closely like the last like, 10 years. So yeah, exactly. It's like Marvel fatigue. It's more about Marvel's specific style of writing superheroes than anything else. All right, guys. So thank you all for being here. I am going to head off. I will be back. So for anyone interested, I'm going to try to stream Thursdays, Sundays, and Tuesdays at 7:30. So if I have a change up in that schedule time, I will definitely let y'all know, probably through the community tab. But I'm going to try to consistently stream 3 days a week. So thank y'all for being here. I'm going to stop the stream now. Probably lay down because I'm very tired. I've been tired all day, but I really appreciate you all coming. It, makes these really fun, and I'll see you all very soon. And I hope to be doing a video, hopefully by, I'm gonna say the end of next week. So I enjoyed all this, and you guys have a great rest of your night.